Norway is a seafaring nation that has pushed boundaries and built know-how on experience and innovation through the centuries. Now we're at a new major shift in maritime history. Digitalization and smart ships are opening up new possibilities. Autonomous ships can create new and sustainable transport systems, offering improved services to the users, replacing heavy trucks on congested roads, and enabling emission and noise-free movement of cargo and passengers. Already, several commercial projects are coming to life. Still, there is a way to go before autonomous ships can be implemented on a large scale. Cooperation on a number of levels is key to making this shift happen. To enable this innovation to take place, Norway has established 4 physical test areas along the coast, where commercial and public parties can test their equipment and solutions in a complex real-life environment. We also have several remote control centres that may supervise and control activities in the test areas. The Norwegian government is committed to helping the industry to develop new, safe and sustainable transport solutions. Several authorities and public service providers therefore participate in test activities. Norway, as the first nation worldwide, has formed a national body of cooperation to promote MASS. Government authorities, cargo owners, ports, shipping companies, equipment manufacturers and shipyards have joined forces to explore possibilities and challenges to make autonomous maritime operations a large-scale reality. To make large-scale maritime autonomy a reality, it is key that the international community develop a good regulatory and commercial framework. International cooperation on standards must be established. Standards for digital and physical interfaces, test criteria and procedures, as well as certification and approval. This work is underway through EMO and the EU. Norwegian national law on the matter is already in the process of being adopted, and guidelines for approval are published. Norway is one of the pioneers in adopting new technologies to create a reduced environmental footprint of transport. By developing safer, efficient and sustainable autonomous ship transport systems, we aim to further strengthen our market position. The unique diversity and expertise of the Norwegian maritime cluster has enabled us to spearhead advanced ship research and development. New, safe, secure and efficient technologies make way for new business models in a blue economy. We welcome all interested parties to take part in the exciting and bright blue future.
Dear all, welcome to the third and last session of the Sustainable Oceans Forum, Driving Efficiency and Sustainability through Digitalization and AI in the Maritime. My name is Nini Paulsen and I work for Norwegian Maritime Exporters as a project manager. On behalf of Team Norway, I have the pleasure to present our moderator for this session, Roger Martinsen, Head of Ocean Industries Innovation Norway.
Thank you very much, Nini, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited for this session. Digital AI. I mean, that is the focus on every conference and meeting you attend across all business sectors. So, what does that mean for the maritime industry? Is it only buzzwords? What can such solutions offer the stakeholders in the industry today, and what do we foresee for the future? What are the pains and gains of implementing digital AI solutions? I mean, we hear a lot of digital twins. We are hearing about, machine learning, also introduced in the maritime sector. We hear about solutions that are enabling optimization of fuel consumption and efficiency, and also reducing thereby GHG emissions. These are topics and issues that I am confident that you will learn more about today in this session. And I would like to present the presenters. They will address the following issues. We will have the first presentation related to automated vessels. The second presentation will elaborate on digitalization and use of data to make better decisions. And the third presentation will highlight real-time execution of energy efficiency based on digitalization. The two first presenters are here together with us. The last one, he will join us digitally. After those presentations, I will invite the presenters up to a panel discussion, and they will be joined by the fourth person, which I will come back to later on. So let me introduce the first speaker. It is Mr. Gianpiero Soncini. He is the CEO of Aribatic IB Marine. So, Mr. Soncini, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very quick introduction about myself. 6th of October this year. I've been in shipping 50 years. I joined the Italian Navy that I was 17. I became an engineer within the Italian Navy, built several frigates, and my graduation thesis was based on computers linked with optical fibers and subject to electromagnetic interference. It was the first thesis on optical fibers in Italy, and one of the first with linking computers with optical fibers. Since then, I've always been into IT and shipping. I'm an automation engineer, I'm a vibration engineer, and all my life has been dedicated to using technology and to make shipping a better industry. So, of course, I've been involved with digitalizations since not only my thesis, but after I left the Italian Navy and I joined NATO, and we built a spy vessel hunting Russian submarines up in the North Sea. And it had to be very quiet, and it had to be designed in a very specific way, and we used computers to verify the underwater radiated noise. And after that, working with a company called Spectec, we developed a software for computerized maintenance management system, and so on until now, today with the IB, where I'm working with performance solutions and complete fleet digitalization. So you can read here what is fleet digitalization. It's a possibility to collect on board all possible navigation, weather, engines, and equipment data. Essentially, we collect data to convert it into information that we can give to the crew and to the people ashore in order to drive the ships in a more efficient, safe, and a more environmentally friendly way. This is the theory. Practice is slightly different, but I'll talk about this later. So, in short, we try to analyze everything that comes out of equipment, whether navigation or technical. And as you saw in the presentation of Norway before, the maritime part of Norway, basically it's part of the IMO MASS concept. It's divided in 4 different steps. MASS is Marine Autonomous Surface Ships. We are at step 1. The Yara Birkenheim is already maybe on step 2, going to spec 3. Everybody's experimenting on autonomous vessel. We're still far away from reaching it, but when you're talking about MASS, the first step is collect data, and convert it into information. The ships which are being built today, they should be all interconnected. It's not happening. I'll give an example later, but in reality, it has become extremely easy today to be able to extrapolate data out of the vessels. First of all, on the navigation system, everybody is using the same protocol, NEMEA 0183, and you can therefore extract data from the ACTIS, from the radar, from the AIS, from the VDR, from whatever equipment you have over there. When it goes into the machinery control room, it's a little bit more complicated because you have 20 different protocol systems communicating between equipment and the automation control rooms. You can have Modbus, you can have OPC, you can have TCP/IP, you can have several other systems, but more or less you can adapt yourself and collect data. But this is, of course, if the equipment is built to transmit data. Because if it's not, you go back to pen and paper. And of course, you can read everything. Once everything is connected, you can absolutely read everything you get. You can store it, you can memorize it, you can analyze it, and you can compare. And when you do that, you all of a sudden apply a different ball game when you're managing your vessels. Because when I came into shipping, the ship was a very isolated entity. We were using radio communication to call home once a week. You know, 2 ways. Everybody could listen to my calls to my wife. And today, everything can happen if the ship is built in a proper way. And we can read every data and analyze every data. And of course, the idea is reaching these goals, you know, making the ship safer and better for the environment. And of course, save money if possible. So you reach better compliance, you do a better assessment, and you know much more of what is happening on your own ships. And there is one thing I insist a lot, because I can hear over one conference after the other, how do you digitalize your vessel? Oh, it's very simple. We give Excel spreadsheets or printouts to the crew. They write down numbers on the spreadsheet, then they put it on the computer, and we get them and we analyze them once a day. This is not digitalization. This is absolutely BS. It has nothing to do with digitalization. As soon as you start writing something, it does not exist in digital terms. So, but how easy it is to read data? Well, the devil is in the details. Because essentially, if your equipment is not built to be read digitally, then you are back to square one. And this, of course, makes it complicated for ships which are more than 2 or 3 years old, because we started to talk about this concept 30 years ago, but nobody was listening. 20 years ago, few were listening. 10 years ago, nobody was listening again. And now, all of a sudden, there is this criteria, let's digitalize everything. But guess what? Almost all the ships you are buying today, they are not geared to be digitalized. So there is no connection. For instance, flow meter, if you have flow meters on board. If you have torque meters on board, you pretend that you want to do fuel monitoring and analysis on fuel consumptions. If you don't have flow meters and torque meters, you don't do it. So, this is why I'm saying, and a little bit, of course, controversial on this, don't make me laugh when you talk about IoT in shipping, because it doesn't exist. At least not today. I hope it will. My experience is that whenever I go on board, I have to do everything by hand, in the sense that we have to run cables, or we have to convert analog to digital, or we have to go back and tell the shipping company, say, by the way, do you know that you don't have a torque meter? Do you know that you have only one flow meter? So at the end of the day, it gets complicated. And I'll use one example. And it was entirely focusing on the fuel management part, on fuel monitoring. And that was, I'll be quick even if I have just a few slides left. But essentially on a fuel monitoring, they're a fairly cheap piece of equipment. And most of the time we find that even on brand new vessels, they don't have an USB output. So the only way to find out what is happening is go to read the number and write it down. So we did an analysis between theory and reality when we were asked to analyze how easy it was going to be to digitalize a fleet of 140 tankers. And here you can see the results. So the ships which were ready were 21% of the fleet. So the ones where we did not have almost to do any intervention except installing the data collector and collect data was 21%. The light parts where you had basically to digitalize the output of existing flow meters and torque meters were about 49%. The medium ones, where you have flow meters are missing to some equipment, main engine or auxiliary engines, were 13%. And the heavy one was the shaft torque meter was missing, plus maybe other equipment, okay? So we did a cost analysis for how much it would have been costing the company to basically only in pure cost terms, so without the time, in pure cost terms, to do the whole work, and it amounted to $1.5 million, maybe. Oh, sorry, I thought. Okay, so the difference was $1.5 million. Of course, when you install a fuel monitor control system to this level of precision, you recover that amount in very, very quickly on 140 tankers. But the problem is always the same. I never met in my whole life, in my whole career, a general ship owner or a ship owner that will part way with 1.5 million without, arguing and discussing for about 22 years. So what happened is that you have to consider that digitalization cannot happen unless you start building your ships in accordance to digital principles, which are simply the ones, everything that you want to measure, you have to be able to read it in a digital format. Okay, and talking about digitalization, lots of people think that we are so modern today. This thing here is, I don't know how many of you know it, I have a very large passion for archaeology. And it's the first computer probably that we know of. It's 2,200 years old. It was found in a Greek wreck on the Antikythera island. And at first, for about, I think 40 or 50 years, nobody knew what the hell it was. It looked like a conglomerate of pieces of metal. And they found out that it's made of, I think, 42 different gears, all connected to a level of complexity that we had absolutely no idea existed 2,200 years ago. So again, we are definitely reinventing the wheel after 2,200 years since the Greek did it, and I wish we would be a little bit faster in shipping at times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sancini. Next speaker is Mrs. Tone Merete Hansen. She's representing Kongsberg Digital, and she's the VP of Sales and Business Transformation. So please, Tone Merete, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Roger, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to attend here today. I work for a company called Kongsberg. You heard from my colleague earlier today, Kongsberg Maritime. We are a technology company. We make great technology, but I will not focus so much on technology today, but how we can apply it and how we can use digitalization to make better decisions. Kongsberg has been a technology company for 200 years, which means that we are used to technology changing. Technology has been introduced also technology changes in the maritime industry throughout the history of seafaring. But the end goal has always been to have safer, more efficient, and more sustainable maritime operations. And throughout this shift, people's jobs have changed. Some jobs have become obsolete. We require new competencies. We really have to change the way that we work in the maritime industry. And of course, climate change and the environmental issues implies a huge responsibility on us as an industry. And there are some very ambitious targets that are set. The Norwegian Ship Owner Association have an ambition that all of their members will be climate neutral by 2050, and that all new builds should have zero emission from 2030. And there's also a requirement within EU called Green Deal, expecting a 55% reduction of emissions by 2030. 2030 is almost like tomorrow. I mean, it really isn't that far away. We don't have all the solutions yet, but definitely technology and digitalization will be needed in order to solve this big challenge that we're all facing. And there is not just one solution. This is borrowed by a Norwegian foundation called Bellona that presented 121 solutions to the climate crisis at the Glasgow meetings a month or two ago. And I have kind of highlighted the ones that relates to the maritime industry. A lot of it goes on technology, competence, changing procedures. So as I said, not one solution to this problem. And let's face it, we have ambitions, but many parts of the maritime industry are not really willing to invest more than they absolutely have to. We see that with accidents happening, just being compliant simply isn't enough always. There are ambitions, but there's also the willingness to invest, as the previous speaker highlighted. But I honestly believe that digitalization is part of the solution. And let's not pretend that it's the solution to everything. Let's not make it the emperor's new clothes. I'm sure you're familiar with the Danish fairy tale. And let's apply it not because it's there, but it's because it's solving problems that we have. And the kind of the drivers, but also the opportunities and the challenges right now are within the market, of course, technology, sustainability and regulations, and also what we've seen in the pandemic situation. It's difficult to go on board the actual assets and do what is needed. So we've been forced to think new and to have more remote access, remote operation, because the physical asset, it's not restricted, but it's hard to go there. And again, we are in this for business. It means that there are 3 objectives that we want to achieve. We want to minimize cost, maximize revenue, and stay safe and compliant. That has to be the overall goal, and these 3 forces are kind of working against each other. Which means that there are some challenges for the digital adoption, and now I'm going to have to turn my head because it's really small there. Return on investment, data accessibility, quality and standard, and of course cybersecurity. If you make things digital, it also makes us vulnerable. I mean, I think the safest right now is to send a letter in the snail mail if you don't want anybody kind of catching or interrupting your communication. In Kongsberg, we see 5 pillars for the digitalization. One is connecting the products, everything that is on board. That was shown by the previous speaker in one of the slides. So connecting information from the sensors on board the vessels. Then you need to structure it because these come from different vendors, different formats. They point to different places on the vessel, so you need to structure it. You need to upload it to the cloud, and then you need to make it available in a digital platform so that you can start analyzing these and then offer services and applications on top of these data. As an industry, we are not there yet, but we are working our way through this. And I think this is where we want to be. We want to have one integrated working surface where the people on board the ship can get support from the people working ashore to do what-if and predictability analysis. An example of that is when you collect a lot of data, still it's looking in the past. It's looking at what has been. What we want to do is to see, okay, how can we use this data? How can we use artificial intelligence doing analysis and make this what should change in the future, doing what-if analysis? And I have a passion for training and competence. And I think if you collect data from a fleet of vessels, there will be some crew or some vessels that do things differently than the others, because end of the day, there are people on board these vessels making decisions all the time. So if we can analyze and look at, is there a particular crew or a particular vessel that is, for instance, using less fuel than the others? Are there crews or vessels that are using more? Analyze this, find out why, and then apply training, because that is a very efficient way of changing people's attitudes and behavior. We will also see a kind of an increasing shift of the maritime decision-making and the maritime competence from being on board a vessel to an onshore center, whether that is remote operating center or it's actually controlling the vessels. But in order to do that, we have to have another buzzword, the maritime digital twin, which is also, I think, in every newspaper within the industry or at every conference. And that is not, the maritime digital twin is not something that has a copyright trademark on it. It's how you define it. And again, let's apply the technology where it makes sense and to the level of detail that makes sense for the type of vessel or the type of operation. And again, it starts with collecting data. You need to have virtual replicas of your assets. You need to structure the data. You need to have some sort of modeling. I mean, a digital twin could be a virtual model of the vessel. It doesn't give you so much, but it gives you some value. And on top of that, we can apply simulation and, of course, autonomy that I think many people have talked about earlier today. I think I'm going to skip this one. An example of digital twin is a Dutch company called Hedera Marine Contracting. They have some monsters of some heavy lift vessels. They have virtual replicas, simulated models of all their vessels, and they use this to very, very early plan their operation, test out different scenarios in the simulator, present it to their clients, train, and then do the actual operation. And these operations might take years to plan, and they have one shot of doing it right. So that's a way of applying digital twin technology to make a better decision. And of course, autonomous shipping that we have talked about starts with a vessel. We need some cybersecurity, and then we need some onshore operating centers, either controlling or monitoring the operations. I have to show you this one because we get points for dissemination in this EU project called Autoship. It's a large project funded by EU, 20 million euros. It's supporting goals from the United Nations. And I need to go back. And what we are doing here, again, applying digitalization, artificial intelligence to take trucks, the transport of goods from trucks onto vessels, using the inland waterways of Europe. Each of these barges will replace 12 trucks, reducing congestions on the roads. So again, applied technology to making our lives better and less traffic jam in Europe. And I think my time is out. Yes, so I will finish here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tone Merete. Now I'm starting to understand a little bit kind of where I'm going within digitalization, thanks to you and to Mr. Soncini. Very good presentations. The next speaker will hopefully join us digitally. His name is Jon Bolstad, and he is, sorry again. Yeah. He's a Strategy and Business Development Director for Yara Marine Technology. So please Mr. Bolstad, you are with us, as I see. And
yeah, I hope so. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome back. So,
thank you very much.
So, Jon, we are very, really happy to hear your presentation right now. So, please, you can run the presentation.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Jon Olsen, or John Olsen, and I am the Strategy and Business Development Director of Yara Marine Technologies. And it's a big hurdle to follow up the previous speakers, and it's always a downside of being last, because there's been some really good points in the presentations before, but I'll try to find at least some unique points to highlight in my presentation as well. First of all, Yara Marine Technologies. A lot of you know Yara Marine Technologies, but just to the new people, Yara Marine Technologies was established in 2010 as Green Tech Marine and acquired by the crop nutrition and agricultural tech company Yara in 2014. We are very proud of being a part of Yara, a cargo owner who provenly invests in decarbonizing maritime logistics, as seen with Yara Birkeland. Now, Yara Marine Technologies is about 250 employees in 7 countries around the world. And only a year ago, we were a one-product company. We were offering scrubbers with the after sales and service. Now, we have a portfolio of technologies, and as you see on the screen, we now also offer wind wings, which is then wind-assisted propulsion, which is able to reduce emissions and fuel consumption by up to 30% on certain sea routes. We do offer shore power, which could potentially then reduce 100% of all the emissions import and 3 to 5% of all emissions from ships globally. And then we have our new products, Fuelopt and Fleet Analytics as well, for our fuel optimization systems and performance monitoring systems. In total, we have installations of more than 700 vessels around the world. So, it's been already mentioned by the previous 2 speakers, but it's not that long a time ago that maritime industry started digitalizing. So moving from paper to digital reports. This has been made possible by sensor technology, which is becoming cheaper and more reliable. So the next step we then saw was digitalization, including then digital reporting and performance monitoring, as we see in the middle picture there. The next step now is that we're in the age of AI and deep learning, and I'll mention a few examples of how we can take advantage of this going forward. Going a bit more into detail about how this has developed practically, it all started with the engines. Then sensors were added, and as a consequence, digital reporting started. The next step was then using this data to focus on performance analytics to improve fuel efficiency and reduce emissions further. As we all know, it is the Autopilot, which now is on the second last step, as you see here, which is then controls the direction a vessel will sail. But only recently, real-time optimal speed optimization has been added on a common basis. And in the end, we have the example of Yara Birkeland, which is now going to be fully autonomous at the same time. But before we get to making all vessels like Yara Birkeland, there are a lot of things we can do in the time between. Yara Marine offers a product named Fuelopt, which is a tool that takes advantage of the exact development I mentioned about digitalization. It reads from sensors on board, like anemometers, flow meter, GPS, shaft torque meters, propulsion control systems, etc. Based on the input there, it optimizes the speed and consumption automatically, very much like a cruise control on your car at home. So this works for both vessels with flexible and controllable pitch propellers. Here I visualize how Fuelopt maximizes the thrust per kilowatt by regulating propeller pitch and engine RPM separately on a vessel with a flexible pitch propeller. This constant optimization can reduce fuel consumption and emissions by 5 to 15%, depending on type of propeller. And this is done by adapting constantly to wind, current, hull resistance, engine temperature, shaft power, etc. So constantly then working as a cruise control on the ship, adapting to the outside conditions and the inside conditions, providing the optimal fuel consumption for the vessel. The question then is how to further improve this. From my view, the next step is to start using AI and big data to forecast optimal speed and consumption along the full voyage. This means continuously adapting to changes in weather forecasts and ETA changes while using digital twin, the buzzword mentioned previously, and historic data to find the optimal speed at all times. So consequently, making speed control autonomous. This is what we have done then with a new product that we're now offering, RootPilot AI, and then allowing the vessel to do continuous optimizations based on then historic data, and then adapting to the ETA of the vessel and finding the correct route and also the correct speed to get the minimal fuel consumption while still making the ETA for the ship owner. So all in all, I think there's very interesting times ahead of us. Using digital twins, the buzzword, using new technology, using data, all in all, there will be plenty of opportunities to improve energy efficiency on the board of the vessels, and then consequently fuel consumption and emissions. So as the last point and a comment, and maybe a bit of a reference to the discussion we had in the panel in session 1 today, the Norwegian government has subsidized the electrical vehicle market in Norway by indirectly paying 700 euros per ton CO2 reduced. On this graph, you see some other examples. So put in perspective, reducing CO2 emissions in the maritime sector is really cheap. And I hope regulatory bodies globally will continue to create incentives for both ship owners and cargo owners to invest in green maritime technology. Because as we see, actually reducing a ton of CO2 in the maritime sector is a lot cheaper than very many other places in the world. So I haven't had full control of time, but I think that was all I had for now. And I give the word back to you, Roger.
Thank you very much, Jon. I hope you can stay with us further for the panel discussion. We have a digital seat for you together with us here, so I hope you find it okay.
Perfect.
Yes. Yes, okay, I have it there. So next up is the panel discussion. We have 3 presenters together with us, Jon digitally, and then I would like to also invite the 4th panelist to the stage. It is Mr. Shaif Sadat from Tomini Group, which is a shipping company. So please join us in the panel. Okay, so since you have not given a presentation, Mr. Sadat, could you just give a brief introduction of your company? It is a shipping company, and if I'm not mistaken, you were the shipping company of the year in Dubai. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So please enlighten us on Tomini Group.
Sure. Tomini Group are predominantly a dry bulk cargo ship owner, family-owned business for 60 plus years, now in its 4th generation. Predominantly dry bulk, but we've also had tankers in our fleet. We've recently re-entered, let's say, the shipping market in the last 7 years, building our own bulk carriers, Kamsarmaxes, Ultramaxes. And it's interesting to note that we entered back into shipping, I would say, at a time where we could see that the development of the technology was already there for us to start pre-planning and pre-poning for the regulatory sort of changes that are coming.
Okay, thank you. Before I start to question the panelists, the professionals we are so happy to have together with us today, are there any questions from the audience? If there are, please go up to the two microphones that are placed on both sides.
There's one over there.
Yeah, please use that microphone up there.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have an observation, it's more than a question. Now, I think there is a considerable gap between advancement in the technology and digitalization of shipping industry and the training. So like the investors put the money on the physical things like investing on IoT, while the human factor or resources who will run these things are still we cannot see any initiative on training for this technology advancement. So I hope on the next Seatrade like this to be changed for the training for the people who will run all these things. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Of course.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you for asking a question. I'm very passionate about training and competency development. And I think introducing all these new technologies, we can't forget about the human element here, because there are humans that are using the technology, and even regardless if the seafarer is sitting on board a vessel or working from shore. And I think that there are, for instance, LNG operated vessels. There is a new training code, IGF code for training for LNG bunkering, but also operating the LNG vessel. Because if you don't give the humans enough competency to operate this and understand the situation, the limits and the opportunities within the technology, I wouldn't say it has no value, but we will see accidents and we will see breaches we will see emissions to air and water. So we have to remember the people, and I wish that the whole industry had more focus on training of these people, because you have new types of vessels, fuel, you have new types of engines. The education and training that you had 20 years ago, like yourself, with all due respect, needs to be maintained, and it needs to be updated. So lifelong training in the maritime industry, to me, is very important.
Mm. Actually, we have a question also digitally. I don't know from who, but it also is addressing, the human aspect and the talents. So the question is as follows: is the maritime industry attractive to the talent we need to drive advances in digitalization and artificial intelligence? I understand you, Tone Verete, is more than happy to answer that. But I also see that Jon, who has raised your hand. Jon, so please, you can answer first.
Well, I think we already seen proof of this previously. We had the Youngship representative in the first session today being ready, and I already see how the rest of, and I used to be president of Youngship as well a few years ago, and I see how my friends and people around me are now getting more and more engaged in the maritime industry, because there's so much opportunity there. There's so much opportunity to do good things and to develop things in the right direction. And there's so many ship owners and actors who want to become more green. So I think this is really attracting new talent to the market, because they see this as an area where actually things can be moved in a positive direction. So just a small comment from my side.
Thank you. Are there any other comments you want to follow up what Jon said? Mr. Sanchini, Mr. Sedat?
Training has always been a sore issue in shipping. We talk a lot about it, and we don't do much. So, of course, one of the advantages of digitalization is that you reduce the crew on board and you bring it ashore. So you don't diminish. Lots of people tell me, oh, you're going to kill a lot of jobs. No. Information technology has created more jobs than any other activity in the world. So it's absolutely false that information technology takes away jobs. It simply makes them better. Today we send people on board for 1 year, and we cannot even disembark them now. And essentially when they are supposed to work 8 to 10 hours a day, but they have to stay on board. Tomorrow they will do the same job as staying ashore. In order to do this, we need more trained people. Is training really a focus of the shipping industry? My personal experience, not at all. Every time I was sending offers to customers, basically 50% of them, they would cut down the training, say we don't need it. The software has to do everything, but it has to be so simple to learn that you don't need training, which is a bit of an opposition in terms. But of course, training is needed, and we need trained people. We need to have more focusing on that. But maybe the best solution is to take them ashore.
Yeah, and what we also we can do is that we can use digitalization to offer training outside of the physical training center. So you could do it at home. I know that many seafarers are reluctant to go to training centers when they are at home. So by offering training also digitally, hopefully we can increase the scope. But I'm also sorry to say that many ship owners, they see training as a cost and not an opportunity to increase revenue or actually reduce costs.
One thing, remember one saying, one of the best sign that I ever read in my life was a conversation, or a joke, if you want to say. It's a conversation between, the CEO and a manager, let's say. And the manager says, but listen, what happens if we spend all this money in training for to our people, and then they leave the company? And the CEO answers, yes, what happens if we don't train them and they stay in the company? So,
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I just jump in there, I think training, if we're talking about from a technology, if we in that sphere alone, I think that begins not on the vessel, that would begin in the office, actually. Training the mindset, first of all, to trust in technology. There's still a gap there. I think we have a transition. We're at a sort of transition point right now where perhaps people on shore are not yet fully trustworthy, or not only of the systems on board, but also they see a gap there in the competency of the crew. And obviously that gap could be filled with technology, but then going back to the point that they don't trust the technology either. So we're in a bit of a strange position right now, but I do see that it will be a short path to the buy-in, let's say, from the shore-based staff in the near future. Once that happens, once they are fully confident in technology, then of course they'll be disseminating that down towards the vessels.
So if I read you correctly, I think more training is needed along the digitalization process. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Now we have several questions from the audience, also digitally, and one of them is following up the presentation made by Mr. Soncini. You showed a slide where you illustrated the maturity of digitalization on new build ships. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 21% or something. So the question is from the audience, Mr. Soncini, is it a costly mistake for ship owners not to invest in digitalization on new builds?
Oh, absolutely. So sometimes the devil is in details, okay? Lots of companies buy ships a little bit because of the price, a little bit because of the pressure. You normally buy ships when the market is up, so everybody's rushing. So it's a shipyard's market. The shipyard decides the price, etc. When the market is down, nobody buys ships. So you basically find yourself always hunting the problem and never solving the problem. So what happens is you take the ship as is. And then you go on board and you get it and you find out that there is no digital output. There is no torque meter. There is one flow meter. So you have a big engine. You need at least 2 flow meters, per engine. And the flow meters don't have a digital output. Or whatever. I'm talking always about the same thing. But even on boilers, you should have it. If you want to measure the consumption, is not only the diesel generator on the main engine. The consumption, especially on a tanker, is boilers and every other alchemy which we have on board. So there is no focus on it when the specs are written. And sometimes you give the specs to the shipper and the shipper says, I'm going to give you this, everything else You want a digital output, is another $1 million more per output, because this is the way our business is. But we defeat ourselves all the time, because then what happens, we are so behind the rest of the industries. I travel so much that I've taken more than 4,000 flights in my life, and I fly on average more than a pilot, about 1,200 hours a year. And the pilot does 900. And I worked a lot with Lufthansa Industry Solution. And I brought them to shipping. I spare you the comments. Okay? I spare you the comments. I said, are you guys Neanderthalian or what? And that is because what they're doing, what today we are trying, they've been doing it sort of what we're doing today, they've been doing it for 20 or 30 or 40 years. For instance, digitalization of all the documentation. We still get ships, brand new, state of the art, 150 millions, you know, and the technical documentation that comes in manuals. Every shipyard different manuals, every manufacturer different manuals. Everything is different. And what do? We take the manuals, you know, a cruise vessel has 2.7 tons of manuals. I know it because I received it, not at my home, in my office. And we take and we pay people, Philippines, Croatia, Poland, etc. And what do they do? Digitalization.
Before Jon and Tone Merete, you can also follow up on how you kind of look at it. I would also encourage Mr. Sedat to comment also. Why is it so? Why isn't the kind of the ratio higher than 21%?
Let's get to the end of the purpose of technology or the purpose of digitalization. It is to enable us in the maritime industry, onshore, on the vessels, to make better decisions, to have data that can be analyzed, interpreted, and an output given to us that makes us have better decisions. So if there's still a gap there, I believe that I think ship owners, I speak for, let's say, small to medium-sized ship owner like us, where return on investment is key for anything that we do. So if we don't have that immediate, let's say, ability to be able to make good decisions, then the incentive to digitalize the ship obviously is less. I did say earlier that, and there was a slide, I can't remember from who, that ships that are ready for, I think it was Jampera's slide, ships that ready for digitalization was almost 60 or 70%. So they are there right now. But those that are obviously that were older, the barrier to entry would be much higher because the return on investment would be much higher.
Okay. Does that have anything to do also not about the size of the company, but type of vessels, type of business? Low margin, high margin business, or do you feel that is the same all over?
I mean, it would be obviously ratio would be relevant to the, of course, naturally to size. Any investment would be relevant to the size of the business that's taking that decision.
Yeah.
But if again speaking for small to medium ship owners, I would imagine that anything that's going to get us a return on that investment longer than 1 or 2 years would be not viewed positively.
1 or 2 years, okay. I see. Tone Merete, Jon, do you have comments to this question as well?
Well, not directly, but I think it's quite interesting what Mrs. Dutt says about the payback time. I think also the 2-year payback time is what we see as the threshold for ship owners to invest. And understandably, they never know what's going to happen next with that ship, if it's going to be sold or not. So, but at the same time, maybe there should be more mechanisms to be more long-term investing when it comes to technology on ships and making it more digital.
So because it seems like a chicken and an egg kind of challenge this. Even the ship owners represented by Sedat said, yet, of course, we need to have a good basis for making decisions, and digitalization will help us. But even so, in reality, it's not like that. So how could we encourage, support the shipping companies so that penetration of digital solutions would increase? Any thoughts about that from the panel?
Yeah, well, I don't have the answer, but I think one of the challenges is that the industry is very fragmented, the value chain is fragmented, because you have ship owners that build a ship, and then you have ship operators, you have somebody else doing the manning and crewing, so then it's hard to pinpoint where is the return on investment for that actual investment, who takes the cost and who has the return. Because if you look at the whole value chain, it would make much more sense to invest. But when you fragment it like that, there is no reason to invest, because if you invest, then somebody else has the return. So I think that's also one of the challenges of the industry.
Gian Piero, I think when we had a talk yesterday, you mentioned that digitalization is a mindset. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, can I ask anybody here in the audience, do you have a Nokia 3270 with you? It was the #1 mobile phone 20 years ago. Do you have it? Do you have a phone which is older than 10 years? 5? Do you have a ship which is digitalized? It's a mindset, because when it is our life, we want the latest model of everything. When it is work, we are very satisfied with what we know and we have. And to move forward is always a resistance, even when you prove beyond any doubt that you are going to save money. Unless the return on the investment is instantaneous, so you say you pay 10 and within 2 seconds you're going to get 20, which is impossible. People will always say, we don't know really, well, we don't have the budget to do it. And therefore, it drags on and on and on. So it's a mindset, because if you're not convinced that digitalization will bring more money into your pockets, you're not going to do it. It's going to be advantageous, you're not going to do it. It's going to be modern, you're not going to do it. There is a company, I cannot say, that embraced the fleet operation control room without having anything to show. In the reality is, it was, for the first year, just monitors. Beautiful, nice things to see, but there was nothing behind. But they attracted so much attention that the business that they had exploded. So there is a potential, but it was the mindset of this company, and then they were the first ones to do it. So
I have actually a quite relevant follow-up question from the audience again, digitally. So whose responsibility is it to improve quality of new builds in this regard? Is it the owners? Is it the yards? Is it the classifying societies? Or
whose responsibility is to do what?
To improve the quality of new builds in this regard. We're talking about digitalization. Any thoughts?
It should be the owners. My personal opinion should be the owners. Yeah. Nothing works in shipping unless the owners want it. And sometimes, though, unfortunately, it works the opposite way. So the owners are forced by IMO, or by class, or by EMSA, or by AMSA, or by whatever, to go, because the owners have been sluggish in moving. If the shipping world is extremely reactive. If you think about all the rules and regulations that we have, they've always happened after an accident. From the Solus Titanic to the Erika package, the Prestige package, absolutely everything is happening after, which is a pity, of course, because when you are subject to the regulations done by regulatory people in Brussels who have no idea what the ship is, then obviously you suffer much more. But probably this is the way it is, because I haven't seen it changing for 50 years.
So how to engage, how to encourage, how to kind of enable incentives for the shipping companies then to kind of be more proactive?
Sorry, it certainly isn't regulation or something that is sort of imposed, because as you rightly said, ship owners only tend to move in any direction once they're actually told that they have to do it. But then the compliance would be limited to just meeting whatever minimum standard that was obviously suggested by whichever body. I don't think that's going to be of great benefit if we're talking about overall sort of improvements in terms of efficiency or environmental impact if we're just following some sort of minimum standard, because as Turner said, that the industry is very fragmented, so it's very hard for a regulatory body to impose something that everybody's on board with, so they end up sort of scaling down requirements. So it's definitely not regulatory. But it would definitely to push the ship owners, as Jean-Pierre says, it's the responsibility to push ship owners. At the end of the day, this is a business. It has to be beneficial to the pocket. Then it will push the ship owners.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question there. But can the ship owners afford it in the longer, middle and short term? Because you see what is coming now. Yeah. I am convinced that we will have imposed the CO tax internationally soon in the European Union, and spreading out. We have the taxonomy. Also giving a pathway for what is green and what is considered green, and that will have an impact on what companies can get loans from the banks and financial institutions. So I mean, it's like this this fairy tale with this rabbit and this turtle, Can you afford it? That is my question. It's maybe yeah. Sorry, John?
I think you raise a very interesting topic there, because in the end, a lot of shipping companies or ship owners are listed on the stock market. So we know exactly what type of earnings they have. And indirectly there, you know that if you want to impose some costly either digitalization components or some other things that are related to making the fleet greener, somebody has to pay for it in the end. And we would be naive if we would expect the ship owner to absorb everything. So I think also the cargo owner needs to become more involved in the picture, an holistic picture. And very often it's you and me in the audience. I used to work closely with a beer producer and on the aluminium production. And they said it would cost €1 per can extra to make the whole transportation emission-free. So in the end, it's also a little bit about how we buy and how our purchasing pattern is, and how everything in between there actually impacts the whole picture. Because once again, I think the cost needs to be shared among everybody along the supply chain, both the ship owner, equipment manufacturer, cargo owner, and end user, as you name.
And authorities, yeah?
Yes, of course, authorities as well.
Yeah. Now we are lifting our heads a little bit. Okay, there's a question. Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, Matthew Dodds from GSTS. Elon Musk said some time ago that if you designed a robot to perfectly deliver a cup of coffee from the coffee making facility to where it needed to go in the office, eventually that robot, given enough data and AI, would kill everybody in the building because they were the ones that the obstacles to delivering the coffee. My question is this: if I was to describe the perfect voyage, where a vessel using almost full AI in the most efficient, cost-effective, and carbon net zero means, embarks its cargo, sails with the most optimal voyage, using the most optimal routing, to arrive at specifically the correct time, using the most efficient means of getting alongside and offloading that cargo and disembarking it, using as much AI as we possibly could, AI obviously being the machines making the decisions on their own without human interference. How far away do you think that the industry as a whole is from that scenario? And I realize that's a very difficult question to answer, but also, what is, in your expert opinions, the single biggest hurdle to getting to anywhere near that scenario?
The biggest hurdle is IMO.
IMO?
Yeah.
Okay. Tone Merete, do you have any views on this?
Not really, but I mean, autonomy isn't new. We've had autonomous vessels part of the time for a long time. I mean, any advanced DP3 operation is highly autonomous. The human, the DP operator, is just sitting there monitoring and then expected to take over manual control if something happens. with a lot or little training. So autonomy is not new, it's just kind of applying it in extending the scope of autonomy. What's the biggest hurdle? I don't know, but we are back to moral discussions, whether the vessel and the cargo is more important than a sailboat that is seen. So I think we have to have human morale into these algorithms.
Jon, do you have a comment on that as well, or?
Well, yeah, I actually do, because I think one thing is accepting to be 100% autonomous, but we can get really far. But if you look at the tanker and bulker fleet, which represents probably 50% of the global fleet, I don't think they're even close to being as autonomous as very many other vessels. So getting these vessels up to 90% autonomous is actually doable, relatively easy, quite soon. But of course, making it 100% autonomous, and we've seen this directly from Jaira Birkeland, how it's not possible to make it 100% autonomous immediately. That's at least, maybe we should accept that getting up to a certain level, like a 90% autonomous, would be almost good enough, and not make it 100%, because sometimes 90% is actually good enough to get the actual real savings, both in cost and emissions.
Okay.
And with regards to hurdle, I think it's financing, good ways of financing that takes away the challenges with the fragmented industry we already talked about.
To follow up this, we also received another question from the audience, which is also related to automated shipping. So, are there any regulatory barriers to adopting automated shipping? You have touched upon it already, but are there any regulatory barriers you foresee?
Well, I think the ship captain has a lot of decision power over the vessel. So who will then make that final decision over the vessel? Today it is the ship captain. So whether you move that decision into the algorithm or you move the ship captain to a shore control center.
Yeah. Who controls the controller?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We are almost running out of time. So, Mr. Soncini?
Just, there is something we didn't answer him, and that is how long will it take? Everything in shipping takes about 20 years. So I would assume that it's going to take 20 years. Actis took 20 years, UMS took 20 years, GMDSS a little bit less, but on average it's about 20 years. IMO can add plus or minus 10, depends. Is there anything we didn't touch upon?
I actually, to wrap up or to use the last minutes we have available on kind of looking into the crystal ball, the future. How do you foresee that digital artificial intelligence will evolve within 2030? Where are we in 2030? And to follow up, what new positions, what new functions will kind of occur along the digitalization path? Do you foresee any new functions? You mentioned already that some of the functions will maybe be put onshore, but are there any other things you see we will come in the future? Any thoughts about this?
I can start.
Yeah.
Again, just following up on the question over there. I mean, we could look in 20 years, but we could actually just look in a short space of time of what technology can bring us today. We are already moving forward on a path. Talking about, for example, just-in-time arrival, I think you mentioned there. As long as we can get systems integrated and speaking to each other, the building blocks for just-in-time arrival on ships definitely are already there, and I feel that would be a big step in terms of efficiency, fuel efficiency, environmental impact. I mean, if we could introduce intelligent route planning, smart ecdises, for example, that communicate with ports, because port software is already there, port planning software is there, smart ecdises, intelligent planning on vessels are already there, weather, AIS data, is already incorporated into this routing. We just need that missing link between the port and the vessel. We could achieve in a very short space of time. And I think we need to think about short-term sort of adjustments rather than always thinking 20 years time or 10 years time and going too far ahead, because we'll get there in the end, but we have to make the steps.
We have a couple of questions also for the audience, but to follow up on what Mr. Sedat said, please.
Yeah, I can just say that 2030 is 8 years ahead, and
Yeah.
I think we will still recognize the shipping industry 8 years ahead. I think we will see more of what we have started. But there are many things that need to change also in SSCW, the code for the standard for trading of seafarers. There are more references to celestial navigation than it is to operating digital equipment. There's a new something called electrotechnical officer, but I think we need to start from the education also, having more digital competencies among the people that work on board the vessels, and hopefully we use technology to make safer and more efficient operations.
Yeah. Mrs. Oncini?
I have to say that, given my age, I think 20 years is a little bit too far away from me. But 8 years, who knows? Maybe I'll still be around arguing with everybody and telling them why you didn't digitalize 10 years ago when I told you.
Jon?
I think it's spot on there. It's why don't they do it is a weird question for me sometimes as well. But I think user cases will be very relevant. Taking one step at a time, working with one-on-one ship owner, and then learning together and collaboration. But it's quite obvious to, I think, most of the people in this panel that it's the right thing to do.
I think now I will give the last question to Jon. It is from Nini Paulsen from Norwegian Maritime Exporters. The question is as follows. Can you give some information about the payback period for your solutions?
Yes, we've seen them on, depending on if it's a flexible pitch or fixed pitch propeller, the controllable pitch propeller has about, we would say 8 to 15 months, and then fixed pitch, 11 to 15 as well. So it depends a bit, but these two solutions are at least very good solutions, very short payback time for the ship owner, and most of the times we have them within a year, which is exactly as requested earlier. Wind wings is a bit different, but it's a bigger investment, with bigger savings, but the payback time depends a bit, of course, on the price of the fuel, and we haven't installed it yet, so ask me again in a half year.
Thank you. We have other questions as well, but now we have run out of time. I really appreciate the participation of our distinguished professionals here on the panel and Jon by digitally. So I really have high hopes for the future. The future is so bright I had to wear shades. Anyway, I have to do that in Dubai, I suppose. But I really also hope that the audience is enlightened by the interesting presentations and the discussions we have here on the podium today. So thank you very much for the professionals who joined me on the podium, and thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to thank everyone for coming today, and the presenters that had good presentations. We had also some good discussions. I would like to mention today from 6 to 8 at Al Wasl Plaza, the Club 2020. We will have a networking event with some drinks and some food. If anyone want to join that, please give me a business card or go to the Norwegian booth and give them the business card, and we will send an invite on WhatsApp. You will meet then many of the presenters. You can continue your discussions with them. I would also, on behalf of the Norway team and Norwegian Maritime Exporters, Innovation Norway, the Royal Norwegian Embassy, and Team Norway at Expo, thank everyone for coming. I think it was a very good event, and looking forward to see you in the future. Thank you.